Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. I am going to be combining both Explorer Best of 1 and Best of 3 into a singular video here, so all your Explorer needs in part, and I'll highlight some of the decks are prevalent in both Best of 1 and Best of 3. So we'll mention the win rate in Best of 1 and then flip over to Best of 3 to see the full deck list. These decks themselves, we're getting all the stats from MTG, what you see on screen. Companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client, tracks win rates, loss rates, deck collection, a whole bunch of free and useful tools that can be used. Link is in the video description. I will also paste all these deck lists into the YouTube video description should you want to copy and get a go with these decks. So we are looking October 13th to the 20th. Platinum to Mythic rank, Best of 1, we are looking at 35,000 game sample size. We'll start with Best of 1. Top performing deck is Mono Blue Spirits at 71%, and we're seeing the top two decks really be Spirits, but slight variation between them, and we'll highlight. This is looking like it is really just, I think, the counter spell that's the different, or slip out the back to Spectral Sailor, or not Spectral, to Shacklegeist. So very limited difference, but it seems like that's been having a good change. But the card that's been introduced to Spirits is Combat Research. So it's another copy of Curious Obsession style effect to draw you cards. This deck is looking to basically counter your stuff, flash in Spirits, have synergy with Lord effects, tap down effects. You can give protection to your stuff through things like Shacklegeist, slip out the back, and then you kind of just slip in extra mana into Ascended Spirit and kind of beat them down that way there. Really with this deck, you can tap down like a Grease Fang, you can tap down like a Geist, you can counter stuff, you can draw a bunch of cards with the deck. You play pretty much at your opponent's turn for the most part, and then you also have stuff like Mausoleum Wander as kind of, even when you tap out, you can have protection against instants and sorceries. So kind of a cool little iteration there with the deck. The next deck we see, I'm going to highlight the win rate in Best of 1, so 61%. And this is 340 games. This is Abzan Greasefang, but we're going to quickly come over to the Best of 3 version, which is at 57%. So even with that, people are always like, play Best of 3. You don't have to worry about Greasefang. You just side in Graveyard Hate. Well, they still beat you because it's still a pretty busted combo, and it has a really good fair game, and most of their sideboard just deals with your Graveyard Hate. So the core of the deck is you want to put cards into your graveyard, particularly Parhelion. And then what you do is you cast Greasefang and you bring back Parhelion animated, attack for 13. You could technically do this as early as turn 2. You cast the Stitcher Supplier and mill exactly Greasefang and Parhelion, and then you cast Can't Stay Awake. You have the fair game of Skyship or Eska's Chariot to kind of get through just a beatdown plan. You got Lily for hand hate. Rafine's Informant gives you card selection. You can eat away at their hand. Bunch of ways, 10 ways to kind of self-mill and get particular cards out of your graveyard. And then if you look at the sideboard, like I said, it's pretty much like deal with any sort of graveyard hate, deal with any sort of graveyard hate, eat away at their hand to get around removal, creature removal that might be hate. Even the opponent's graveyard decks, heavy removal decks, you can also bring in Trespasser for a fair game. And then you have Skyship, which is very, very good against the Rakdos mid-range deck. So that's Abzan Greasefang. And then we have Mono Red Aggro in Best of 1. So this is a deck I found a little underwhelming when I played the game. It's heavily reliant on the Embercleave Annex kind of combo. And it kind of just runs out of gas against Abzan or heavy removal decks. You can spam the board quite a bit, and you have the option to go wide, but you're really relying on the 2 lightning strikes to hit the Greasefang, and then they oftentimes can just combo the next turn. But it's a really aggressively slanted red deck that you can go over the top with Cleave. Torbrand gets you extra points of damage to pump through. If you have Torbrand on the field and you cast Chain Whirler, it sweeps up your opponent's board by dealing 3 damage as opposed to the 1 damage. So it's scalable to hit most creatures in the deck. A big thing that you usually see with these red decks is whether or not they're on Rampaging Ferocidon as a way to kind of get around singular blockers, but also ping additional damage and shut off life gain. And speaking of life gain, we have Selesnya Angels. So this is a big life gain style deck. That is Righteous Valkyrie. So this is the 3 mana, 3/3 angel. If you gain 5 or more life a turn, you create a 4/4 angel with vigilance. And then for 6 mana, I don't know why it's doing that. Doesn't like that. Resplendent Angel. So with this deck here, you're looking to do a bunch of life gain synergies. So you have like Luminarch Veteran, Bishop of Wings. This was actually closer to my version of the deck where we're playing Prosperous Innkeeper, helps your mana fixing and gets you early turn for Collected Company. This particular version is more built around the Resplendent Angel to try to proc it as much as possible. And you have Trellisara that can help you dig for specific pieces. So while not immediate card advantage, it does help you dig for particular answers. And then you have a Johnny Strength of the Pride as a one-sided board wipe with this particular deck. This deck can go toe-to-toe with Greasefang in the sense it can just outgain them in terms of life. And then you can also just make big enough blockers that their Parhelion's like the smallest flyer in the game, and they can't really do much at that point there. For best of one, we also have Rakdos Sacrifice. This is a Cat Oven deck that's using Claim of the Firstborn to steal your opponent's creatures and sack them for value. It's got a couple of anvils for some alternate kind of drain. So the anvil gets around Graveyard Hate, where Cat Oven would get hit by Graveyard Hate main. You have Blood Tithe Harvester is kind of a fair card. Some Meat Hooks in there. Obnixilus for like the control-y style strategies or just additional kind of grind. You can steal their creature, sack it to Ob, get value. Mayhem Devil, Fable on the top end. So just lots of good cards in this deck. So it's pretty solid. I was liking playing it. I just really like Obnixilus. So going to best of 3, there's a couple decks I want to highlight here as well, but we have 15,000 matches, so about 30 to 45,000 games of Magic because it's best of 3. We have the Rakdos mid-range. This is kind of the Jund deck, the poster child of the format, 60%. Really, this from this deck to the Pioneer version, we're just missing Dreadbore and a couple niche sideboard cards like Rending Volley. Some of the decks are on Lily, some have been moving off Lily in some numbers. But you're really just playing like all these ridiculously busted cards. I think this version is slightly heavy on the 3-drops. So while Bone Crusher is another 2-mana removal spell, we typically see some number of Heartless Acts in addition to deal with like Greasefang decks in best of 3 because you need a 2-mana spell. If they're on the play, they could combo you out on turn 3 and you're reliant on 1 Eliminate because you usually can't enable Fatal Push in this deck without a blood token. And then you would need it to be on turn 3 still. So I'd probably trim maybe a Lily and maybe a Bedevil main. While this is flexible, you have a lot in terms of 3-mana spells, but Shieldred's replaced kind of the 4-drop slot. We've also seen some numbers of Chandras in these decks as well, which is a powerful card to kind of get you some accrued card advantage. But Fable, Trespasser, we got Croxa that fills the yard, comes back, a lot of creature lands. This is really just like grind out your opponent. And then in your sideboard, you got a bunch of options. Some Duress for hand hate, Bankbuster for card advantage, Hearse for graveyard hate, Hitazuku for like Cat Oven decks, like aggressive decks, as well as some graveyard hate. K-Command is a flexible spell. Obnixilus for the control matchups, Extinction Event as a sweeper, especially against chunkier decks, and then Kalidas as a life linker, and it makes you some tokens as well. And then lastly, we have Mono Green Stompy. This is a kind of a chunker deck. You're looking to go bigger on the aggro side, so something like Stomp is very good against this deck. So you have 6 elves, accelerants, any combination of these 6 is fine. Might be safer 3/3 just in case like there's weird like meddling mage effects, which I don't think exist, but in any case. You have Primal Might and Tail Swipe as fight spells, Ooze as graveyard hate, some pack leaders in there for card advantage, and then it's a Collected Company shell. So you still have Love Struck, Kazandu Mammoth, Ronus, and Old Growth Troll, 3 copies of Henge, and then 2 copies of Defiler to let you play some value there and make your board really, really big. And then in your sideboard, you have like name Reflection of the Kikis, name a Planeswalker, name a creature land, name kind of specific effects. You can name the crew, I think, of Parhelion, get them that way. Graveyard Hate, this is get brought in usually against control decks or Planeswalker heavy decks. Card advantage for grindier matchups if it's just all targeted removal. Probably really good against Rakdos, Sands like Liliana if this is your only creature. Just some grind effects with the Planeswalker package, and then Elder Gargaroth as like a big chunky body against creature decks just to go over the top. So that's Explorer for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been liking in the format, what you are hoping for from the next Explorer drop. And we will catch you next week. Hopefully, it's been a busy one for me. They're making me go back into the office this week for my full-time job, so haven't been able to do too much gameplay, just kind of going through the backlog of pre-recorded stuff, but we'll try to get some new, fresh gameplay out for next week, in addition to our regular scheduled weekly meta breakdowns. In any case, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one, and stay safe out there.